Hello and welcome to today's session titled Master the Art of Customer Retention. Thanks for taking the time to be with us today. The talk of today is going to focus on customer and how to generate value for customer. As businesses obviously put a lot of effort in trying to acquire new customers, by doing so, they might overlook customers that they have already won over. But existing customers hold tremendous value, and that deserves to be nurtured. And how do we do that? That's exactly what we are going to be talking about today, and also sharing some examples of how we do it at ZoomInfo. Just to let you know, this webinar is live streamed, so should you have any technical issues, feel free to let us know using the Ask a Question button, and someone will assist. Also, you will be receiving the recording of this webinar once the live session is over. That should be a bit later today. Also, this session is meant to be engaging, so it's an opportunity to ask any questions to the speaker. So if any questions come up, don't hesitate to send them through via the Ask a Question button, and we'll go over them after the talk towards the end of the webinar. Also, I'd like to show our safe harbor statement. This is to let you know that ZoomInfo is a publicly traded company, and any information we have today might contain forward-looking statements. Any buying decision you make should be made based only upon currently available products and offerings. Okay, so before we dive into that, into the talk, we'd like to have a better understanding of which job roles are in the audience. So you should see a poll popping up on your screen. So feel free to interact with that. Our speakers would like to let you know which role represents you best, so that they can address points that are relating to your specific role. Okay, yeah, I can see some results coming through now. It's taking some time. Okay, so very interesting. The results are in. So lots of you are from customer success and in equal share sales and other roles. If you're from a different role, let us know in the Q&A button. So Clara let us know that she's from membership management. Thank you. All right, so I'm very happy to have today 3 panelists who are experts in creating value for customers. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Ali Syed, Area VP of International and Revenue Growth, Mark Cooks, Director of Customer Success, and Han Black, VP of Sales Development. So great to have you here, everyone. And during these 45-50 minutes or so, they will be going over how do you retain customers. They will be talking about we implement the LAER model as ZoomInfo and key takeaways for you at the end. And with that, Mark, I'm going to pass it over to you.
All right. Hi, everybody. So I head up the international customer success team here at ZoomInfo. And I think just before we get going, it is amazing to see that 42% of everybody on this call represents customer success. So hopefully you'll find some very fascinating and tactical information that you can use during this webinar today to really take that away with you. So we are going to introduce you to some of the adopt and expand motions that we use here within ZoomInfo, but also teach you some tips and tricks that you can use wherever you are on your customer journey. But just before I talk about the adopt motion, one thing I want to introduce you to is an industry called the technical or the Technology and Services Industry Association, also known as the TSIA, that those of you have not heard of that before. So the TSIA specialise in industry insights across all different verticals, industries, technologies. They do a lot of different surveys throughout all different organisations within SaaS and services that are offered. And so some years ago, they actually did a survey on the state of customer experience and customer behaviour specifically. And one of the key findings that they found during that survey was that customers are less inclined to focus specifically on the product and more inclined to focus on the business outcomes that they achieve by actually procuring that product in the first place. And that is a big motivator for the land motion. As a result, the TSIA actually took the land and expand motion and built their own customer engagement model, known today as LAER. So LAER is your land, adopt, expand, and renew. And so throughout this webinar, we will touch on the different milestones of LAER. So when we break those down, the L, otherwise known as land, and if we could just move the slide on to the next piece. There we go. So when we think about land is everything related to sales and marketing activities required for the first sale to that first customer and the initial implementation. Now, for this webinar, we will not talk about the land motion. Instead, we will focus heavily on the following three, which is adopt, expand, and renew. Adopt is primarily driven on everything required to enable customers to drive technical and consultative adoption to help deliver those business outcomes and to really drive the return of investment, which leads us to the expansion and the expand module, really built on how we can cost effectively help our customers to actually drive additional functionality and match and align to their use cases, which in turn for us means cross-sell, which means upsell, which means more revenue, which means more bookings. And renewal is everything driven on that renewal event. How do you retain your customers? What does the renewal processes look like from that model? And Ali later on today will be talking to you specifically around the expand and renew motions. But to get us started, I'm going to talk to you about the adopt motion. I'm going to talk predominantly about three things: customer lifecycle, onboarding customers, and adoption milestones. So when we think about great customer experience and converting great customer experience into not only time to value, but actual lifetime customer value, it's important that we define beneficial, mutually beneficial relationships with our customers. And to do that, we really need to think about what that customer lifecycle looks like. It starts internally, and it starts with the teams that you have built out and what the key parts and milestones of that journey look like. So here at ZoomInfo, as you can see on the image that I'm showing, we have defined the key milestones that we know define a successful customer journey all the way from land to renewal. And during that journey, we will identify key primary teams or stakeholders that are responsible for delivering that element of the journey, as well as supporting roles. But the primary roles will have KPIs, measurable outcomes that they need to deliver on to successfully and consistently deliver on customer experience. I'm going to give you an example. Let's look at onboarding in the middle here. In the middle, you have the learning and development team, you have the onboarding manager, and you have the integrations team. Now, all three of those teams are responsible for separate parts of the onboarding journey, but they all interface with the customer. They'll all have their own outcomes that they need to develop and their own KPIs that they will work towards. But they all have the same goal, and that is delivering an exceptional customer experience. When you build your own customer lifecycle, start by thinking about what are the key milestones within a customer journey. What teams need to interface with a customer as part of that milestone? What are the backup supporting teams that we need? And most importantly, as we define all of that out, what does a pass the baton look like? And what I mean by that is, what is the process and the handover notes and the documents that are required to pass it from onboarding to customer success, or from customer success to the account management team, and so on. Now, for those that have been around CX for a while, you will know the absolute importance and critical of onboarding. Onboarding is extremely important when it comes to helping our customers get value out of the solution. And well, hopefully, as you're doing onboarding, you'll know that customers are most excited to get their hands on the platform as soon as possible, which is why we balance scale and efficiency with putting the customer first in ZoomInfo and making sure that we center many of our processes around excellence when it comes to onboarding. So we break down onboarding in 4 predominant milestones. We have the planning stage, we have the technical implementation, we have the enablement and education, and then we have the overall adoption. And we incorporate all 4 of those into onboarding. We will not move a customer onto the next stage until all 4 of those are complete. Let's take planning as an example. We know that customer confidence is important. We know that they have made a huge commitment up front during that land phase, but we also know that they want to hit the ground running as quickly as possible, and time to value is a critical KPI to track. That's why within just a few days, we will make sure that we have a meeting with the customer and onboarding manager, no matter the size of the customer. We will have them on a call where we will not only allow them to play with the solution for the first time. When it comes to ZoomInfo, they'll probably want to search for themselves or search for their own company within the platform. We'll let them do that. We know the importance of experiences, but we will also reaffirm and realign on those outcomes that they're looking for, both during the onboarding stage, what they want to achieve during the adoption piece, and longer term as part of the strategic outcomes that we're looking to deliver. So make sure when you are defining your onboarding practices, you know the key milestones within onboarding, and you put both customer confidence and time to value at the very center of building out an onboarding process, because we know that many customers will likely suffer a downsize or even a retention issue when it comes to the renewal stage. If they do not have a successful onboarding, they can track that time to value and they see those first initial outcomes. And that really brings me back to the customer success lifecycle that we talked about before. Now, with the customer success lifecycle, so far we've looked at the key milestones, we've looked at the teams that's required and the KPIs. Now I want to zoom in to the actual customer success team, and many of you on here represent customer success. So let's look at that adopt and engage piece. What we want to do within the customer success lifecycle is to start to build out key engagements, key milestones when we engage with our customers. Now, I have to caveat that I know that no 2 customers are the same, and every customer will have a different experience, a different journey that they will go on. But the important piece when we build this out is that we define a framework. Why? Well, by defining a framework, we can do multiple different things, such as personalizing experiences that customers have. We can be more strategic with what we are trying to achieve during the adoption process. We can scale. Scalable customer success is a huge piece. We don't always need to put people or personnel in front of every single engagement that we do. Sometimes leveraging technology is better. For example, here in ZoomInfo, we will lean into the ZoomInfo platform and we will use our tracker functionality so that we can see where and when people are moving across organizations or through different organizations. We can intercept that early on and build relationships with key stakeholders in a customer organization. Now that flows and changes depending on the customer, but by building that framework and building those engagements that you can see here, you capture that information early. And so I want to highlight 3 key things on this slide. We have the usage check-ins, we have the proactive meetings, and we have the strategic business review. We use the usage check-ins to really drive adoption, to continually introduce our customers to new functionality as and when it's released, and make sure that we're aligning on the functionality they're already using. We use proactive meetings to make sure that we're having higher up value consultative conversations, which Hang will touch on a little bit later. And we use the strategic business review to bring all the key stakeholders from both sides together to make sure we not only ensure that over the last 6 or 12 months or however long it was that we have achieved the business outcomes they're looking for, and that has turned into a return on investment that we can track, but we define what the next 6 months, what the next 12 months will look like. And so it's important when you think about building out your customer success lifecycle that you define all of those key engagements, you build the framework around it, and then you incorporate multiple other programs you may have, such as NPS or voice of the customer, that will be a little bit more flexible as and when you build out that life cycle. And so just before I hand over to Hang, I also want to talk about adoption milestones. We track many different milestones here within ZoomInfo because we know the importance of having our customers adopt all of the functionality within the platform. But we want to be prescriptive. We want to be personalized. Let's take the VP of Inside Sales. We know that the VP of Inside Sales is ideally tracking not only the retention numbers and the revenue numbers, but the booking numbers. And for us to help the VP of Sales, we will prescribe a different set of solutions, a different set of products to help them achieve those outcomes than we would for another team, say marketing or say operations. And so in this case, we might want to talk about Tracker and being able to keep an eye on those key stakeholders they're looking at. We might want to talk about intent and making sure that we are staying ahead of the game in terms of what different topics and trends our existing customer base are searching for. So we can not only intercept, but help and guide them and provide best practices on what technologies to use. The key is not just offering a set of solutions to customers, but being personalized in your approach and identifying the different personas that you need and then prescribing the right solution to them. And all of this leads to value. And so to talk a lot more about value, I am happy to introduce you to Hang Black, who is our Vice President of Revenue Enablement. Hang, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark. So I want to talk to you a little bit about value. And I'm curious if you've ever heard about the term medic. Now, it's not often, it's been around for about 30 years. And it's not often used in customer success, which I think is actually a disconnect between sales and CX sometimes. So medic is a sales qualification methodology that sits on top of any value messaging. So you can use command of the message, challenger, Sandler, and it all works the same, but it's meant to really understand the customer, the customer's point of view. So just for a review, M is for metrics. And metrics, I want to remind folks that it's the economic impact of the solution, and it generally includes a number. You want some sort of proof points in dollars or percentage signs. So I really want to reinforce that, metrics like you'll have a better security profile, or you'll have better contact data. That in and of itself is not a metric. It's the number that's valuable. E is for economic buyer. They're the person that has discretionary use of funds. They create the budget. They can actually kill the budget. They can expand a budget. So think of it as not the person who can write the check. Many of us can write the check, but it's actually the person who owns the bank account. The first D is decision process. What is it? Who needs to be engaged at what point to make the right decision? So really, you want to look at the influence circle. The next piece is decision criteria. What is the formal technical criteria that compare the suppliers and their solutions? So when you think about value, you've got to think about, how do we make it sticky for them? How do we make a solution very specific to the customer in their use case? So Gartner calls this sense making. And then I for identified pain, that's the link between business outcomes and the compelling event. The trigger event. Now, I'm sure you've all heard, when's the best time to fix a roof is when the sun is shining, right? You don't want to be identifying the pain, addressing the pain when you're actually feeling the pain. And finally, C for champion. Who's going to sell for you when you're not in the room? The champion must be in the influence circle of the economic buyer. So if I think about this, from a customer success lens, ideally, once the sale has closed, all of this information is transferred from the sales team over to the CX team. And from the CX team, what we think about is how do you make it continuously sticky? So if I think about a garden, and I'm thinking about what I'm going to produce from my garden, I can plant seed after seed after seed. But really, if I don't water my field, fertilize my field, till the soil, we're actually not going to grow the garden. So to grow a garden, I've got to have different kinds of seeds. Once I have one seed in the garden and the soil is fertile, what other seeds can I plant as well? And how do I make sure that I nurture it? Who's the gardener? Who's the farmer? And how do I nurture it so that I've got a very well-tilled garden? And with that, I'll pass it on to Ali on the expand and renew.
Thank you so much, Hang. All right, folks. So on the expansion and renewal side, I'm going to be talking about and really kind of using what Hang and Mark have been sharing with you over the past couple of moments just now as well. So really, when you think about expansion and renewal, these are really only opportunities that come about through the success that you are driving through building relationships from the point of the adoption element that that Mark spoke about, and using methods like MEDDIC are going to create a process-driven approach for this to happen. So when we talk about expansion and renewals, we really need to carry through that model into expansion and renewals as well. And so I'm going to really be talking about, under these three banners, there are probably 5 or 6 key elements that you want to think about, and actually how we operate account management at ZoomInfo. So when you think about relationships are key, it sounds pretty obvious to build relationships, but when you are managing multiple accounts, depending on whether you're in the SMB segment, mid-market segment, or even enterprise, there are different challenges that you face. So at SMB, you might have a single point of contact, but you might have many, many accounts. How do you keep on top of those to manage regular business review meetings? Or in the enterprise model, you might be thinking about multi-threading. So how do you maintain relationships effectively across all of those customers that you need to ensure that you're uncovering economic buyers at the different stages of the life cycle? So before we get to expansion, let's think about renewal first. And renewal really kind of builds on what Mark spoke about around building relationships. One thing that is pretty obvious, but doesn't really necessarily always happen, is around maintaining regular business review meetings. Now you can kind of like split these up into a strategic business review, which might be a much larger piece of discovery, as well as a look back on the previous quarter or previous month, as well as a go forward plan. But you can also have with other decision makers within the process or other influencers, smaller kind of like touch points to be able to just have regular check-ins. This might be around usage and adoption. One of the key things is that when you do onboard a new customer, adoption can wane, particularly with if you're depending on who you're selling to. In our instance, for example, our products and services are generally geared towards front-end sales staff or go-to-market teams. With 101 different things that they're managing, it's quite hard to get adoption on net new products or solutions. So it's our job, it's imperative for us to ensure that we're providing regular support on a proactive basis to really kind of add value. And really that's the key here, is about adding value at the different moments as opposed to taking. So when you think about expansion and renewal, you're thinking about how do I grow and get more money from out of my customers. But really, if you model this on a 3-to-1 ratio, where you drive value 3x more than what you're asking for back in return, you will see that there will be a natural discovery process that you will identify for the expansions and the renewals to just happen organically. It doesn't even really need to become a point of contention or concern, because the customers see the value in the product. You effectively become the go-to-market structure of why they need you to be able to build their business off of. So really think about being proactive. And those strong relationships really naturally create an opportunity to uncover new needs, because if you're approaching MEDDIC in the right way and you're applying it in your day-to-day methodology, uncovering new needs actually is more about a conversation and a discovery process that you're kind of like taking the opportunity to probe. What I've seen in the past is most account managers, and I've been guilty of this as a past individual contributor and an account manager myself, is that you don't tend to probe enough to be able to uncover the true demand that sits beneath the surface concern. So really think about how you are, when you're asking a question, take the opportunity to deepen your knowledge or your understanding around what those needs specifically are, because you might actually just simply be uncovering the symptom, not necessarily the real problem that sits right underneath those layers. So think about what those problems may be from both, from all the way from smaller organizations all the way to larger ones. And think about, how your competitors, for example, in this instance, might be doing a better job than you of uncovering those needs. If you are not in touch with your customers on a regular basis, or if you're not necessarily looking at creating those uncovery points, your customers may not know that you have a specific type of service or product that actually might solve that problem for them. And really what they're going to market to be able to look at competitors that you could have created an opportunity to grow that account just organically through building a solid discovery methodology or process. And finally, to Hang's point on the previous slides, is that it's really important to identify the right stakeholders. I mean, I cannot tell you the amount of times that we have uncovered the fact that our account managers are really speaking or engaging or putting proposals to the wrong people. The stakeholders are not the right ones in these particular instances, and it then effectively resets the sales cycle because you have to start the process all over again. So think about an 80-20 rule is that discovery is going to drive the 20% of the execution. So if you do 80% in your planning, 20% is the execution when it comes to growth and renewals. And this is all about using that MEDDIC process to be able to drive that. And one of the ways that we keep our account managers on top of things is using our platform like Chorus. So Chorus is an amazing platform tool for me to be able to understand where the gaps are in any of the conversations that my team are having with our customers. And now our new generative AI solutions, it makes that even easier because I don't necessarily always have to listen to all the calls. I just need to get back the summary that I automatically get back on every single one of the meetings that the team are having with our customers, which means that it creates an opportunity for me to have really insightful discussions with our account managers to be able to understand where the gaps are or where there's an opportunity for growth and for us to create an environment for real discussion in our one-to-ones. So that's one example there of how we use our tools internally. And finally, KPIs are more of a driver of insight here. So the data will ultimately allow you to take your next steps and your next actions. So monitor the KPIs to drive that engagement. And ultimately, it will create an opportunity for you to decide which sales motion, which sales play that you're really going to be using, and then ultimately creating the cues for having those authentic, meaningful conversations with your customers. And on that note, I wanted to provide you with, share something with you just off the back of that as I wrap up this portion of my session, is thinking about, my apologies, wrong button here. Is thinking about this slide here. So at ZoomInfo, one of the things that we have done is open sourced our playbooks. And you'll see that shortly on the next slide. But if you think about the stages of the customer lifecycle from acquisition, upsell, cross-sell, retention, and then finally win back, because we are going to lose customers. But there is always an opportunity, if you have built a good relationship, to win those customers back at some point in time. So over every one of these stages, we think about how we can engage with our customers in a meaningful way. So specifically in this area, if we look at upsell and cross-sell, there are opportunities for white space all the time. White space may be, for example, when you're thinking about a land and expand model. So if the landed deal may be only 10% of the workforce that you are looking to target, there is also 90% there for you to go after as an account manager or as to be able to drive further adoption. This is going to take time to do that because you're building trust with with your customer throughout the process to be able to start unlocking those additional needs. And so even on our playbook, we actually have an opportunity or a play called expansion of licenses or seats as one example. You can take that away and be able to start thinking about how to implement that in your day-to-day. Now, some of you may have some access to our tools, some of you may not. But whether you're doing it manually or through our automated processes to be able to automatically import our plays directly into your workflows, there's very insightful information in there for you to use every single day and to be able to share with your teams. So with that, I'm going to pause for the key takeaways here. So on the first instance, adopt a strategic approach. Really think about discovery and the conversations that you're having. Make sure that they're authentic. Manage your data hygiene. That is absolutely key. I did notice that there are no sales operations people on this call, but share this recording with them to think about how important data hygiene is for your customers. And then finally, optimize your go-to-market plays. It's a really powerful way to be able to start creating automated processes to be able to get to your customers quicker in the right time in a personalized way. So have a look at this website, gtmplay.com. Take a picture of the QR code. We'll pause here for a couple of seconds for you to take the opportunity to do that. This will lead you directly to the open source platform that we have on our playbook. And you can choose as many as you want. There are over 100 plays in here for you to take away with you today. Okay, so I'm going to open the floor to Q&A across myself, Mark, and Hank.
Thank you, Ali. So yeah, this is an opportunity really to ask any questions you have for our speakers. So we've got a couple of questions here for now. So one goes, how can we gather feedback from customers to understand their needs and identify areas for improvement? So perhaps, Mark, do you want to take this?
Yeah, I'll absolutely take that. And I think just before I answer that question, it doesn't matter whether you're on this call and you're coming from the SDR world, whether you're on the sales world, whether you're on the customer success world, you're in the renewal team, scan that go-to-market plays that Ali pushed on before, because there are so many different plays that you can get there that you can leverage yourself, from expansion plays that you can use, from retention plays that you can use. There are so many good nuggets of information in there that might just bright a spark for yourself that you may want to go and execute upon. And as Ali said before, you don't need technology. Things like ZoomInfo will enable that a lot more effectively and efficiently, but you can absolutely take away with that material and get started with it today. So I highly encourage that. And I think to come back to the question on customer feedback, I think there's multiple ways that we can look at feedback. Number one, we should always be actively listening for feedback at every single part of the journey. So you have NPS, which you can always do, voice of the customer, NPS programs, which will give you that transactional and relationship level feedback. But the important thing always goes back to discovery. By doing more and more discovery with individual personas, you are, as well as doing discovery, you're placing yourself in a position to become that trusted advisor, to build relationships. And by doing that, you earn the right to ask them for feedback, and they are more likely to give you very honest feedback. So I think the best advice that I can give you when you think about how do you generate feedback from customers, it's make sure you have your programs in place, whether that is NPS, whether that's CSAT, not just from a support side, but from an overall organization piece. But probe those questions at the right time, right? Whether that is at the end of onboarding, or whether that is when they've just implemented or spun up a new feature 30 days later, or whether they've just been through an expansion play that's just been executed on. Time that relationship feedback that you're doing correctly, but use discovery as an opportunity with existing customers to not only identify new opportunity, but to understand where they are today and the biggest challenges that they are having.
Thank you, Mark. So we've got one more question here. And they're asking, how can we establish clear sales processes and workflows to ensure a smooth customer journey and maximize value delivery at each touch point. Ali, would you like to take this one?
Sure. So when you think about sales process, this is around optimizing really how you are creating relationships with your customers. The softer part of that as well is also to ensure that you're building the relationship at these touch points. But the best way to be able to do that is to create a very clear plan when it comes to the sales process and how to optimize those. So if you go through the LAER model that we just touched on, and you think about all of the different stages of those journeys, one of the most important things to think about is that what are the reasons why a customer would want to get in touch with you? And number two is that why you would want to get in touch with a customer. Once you have that all mapped out, that should give you really, really almost like a funnel approach as to the reasons why each of those processes that are created are driving the engagement. Because ultimately, the milestones that both Hang and Mark spoke about in their sessions, or in their sections rather, are really about creating the opportunity to have a conversation. So the first thing is about, before you think about sales process, is that why you want to engage in a relationship with your customer outside of it just being about the transactional conversation of either asking for more money or asking for them to renew for another 12 months. So as part of your sales process methodology, first it's about asking the right questions internally. And then you go on to start mapping out what those mean. They can be then codified into places like your CRM. They can be codified into your automation rules that you may have on things like sales automation. You might have some tools to be able to create those engagement opportunities. But it's really important that you map those back. And actually, again, these need to be done in tandem with your product teams, with your they need to be done with your customer success teams. They need to be done with the sales teams. They need to be done with every single element of the touch points here to be able to drive the best outcomes. Because if you ultimately end up optimizing for yourself, there is a point at which the system will break because you're not optimizing for the business as opposed to your own line of business itself.
Thank you, Ali. So we've got one more question from Catherine here. Which might be for you or for Mark, but well, she's an AM. So she's saying, I am an AM for an outsourcing company managing, I think you mean 120 B2B clients. Managing business review schedules and frequencies are extremely, I think, difficult. I think you mean as client needs vary. How do I know which accounts to prioritize? And what ZoomInfo module would be best for us to start with? Maybe for you, Ali, because she's an IM.
Catherine, that's a great question. I think what you need to do, first of all, is separate tools and then ultimately what the relationship piece is here, okay? So ultimately, any tool, even like ZoomInfo, is a tool to create the opportunity for you to drive further engagement with your customers. What you have to first understand is that your business metrics, what is important to you as a business internally. So one of the things that we do actually as a very simple methodology is to create just a almost like a 4-box grid. And really that 4-box grid is about high growth, high engagement, all the way down to the bottom left, which is low growth, low engagement. And if you start kind of plotting your customers in that grid, it will automatically and organically, you will start seeing very clearly who you need to focus on first of all, as a part of your next steps. That will be able to then create cadences, for example. So you might have low growth, low engagement customers that might just want to speak to you at the renewal period, but actually because they might be coming up for a certain renewal and you've not kind of scheduled that methodology, it means that it can become quite overwhelming. So start creating a system around high engagement, high growth opportunity accounts, and then work backwards from there. Then you can then start thinking about using platforms like ZoomInfo to be able to start creating opportunities for multi-threading. So as an if you're managing, for example, outsourcing companies, like 120 of them, that's a large book of business. for anyone to be able to manage. So really look at you're trying to find ways to systematize your approach to those customers that enables kind of like high engagement versus low engagement. Once you've figured that out where that is, you can go to teams like your RevOps teams or sales ops teams or someone who has the mechanics or the data behind it to say, how often is this customer buying more from us? How long have a customer have they been with us? How important are they? Those are the various different metrics that I was speaking about earlier, about those KPIs that will drive the engagement that you have to do that. And then ZoomInfo creates the opportunity for you to say, hey, look, we're only speaking to one particular department of this. Let me start creating a workflow around the 3 other areas of the business that I can start creating engagement. So if, for example, you have one of our platform tools like websites or intent that are looking for your services or products on the market, you can automatically create a workflow within ZoomInfo Sales OS, and then move that into a sales cadence that allows you to create the personas and the multi-threading opportunities to reach out to those customers as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Ali, there's another question from Clara, probably touches on what you just said, but she's asking, what renewal strategies would you suggest for boosting retention?
Okay, so we'll talk about, I think I'm going to share part of that logic with Mark as well, because I think this is really important that we talk about customer success and account management working hand in hand when it comes to theories like this. One of the things that we do, which is really important, is that, for example, Mark and I meet regularly on a one-to-one basis in group team meetings as well. And you can also do this if you're an account manager as well or a leader, to do this with your counterpart or your peer as a CSM or as a leader of any of those particular business units. I think you need to understand what are the health metrics that you're looking at versus what your intention is as part of the renewal process. For example, if Mark were to raise, that there are 5 flags here on these customers, my question there would be is that what those flags are and what are the indicators or concerns there. We then would take that to the next step is to say, well, right, okay, how early in advance of this conversation are we having these kind of areas of red flags, and how quickly do we have the opportunity to fix them? If these are it depends on how close to the retention to the renewal process that you're getting. If you're very late stages, then you might have very little levers here to be able to pull other than things like price. And that's the worst thing that you would want to do, because it's the last resort, and you're really kind of like playing into competitors' hands here when it comes to working on price. But I've spoken a little bit around how you kind of like build those relationships between customer success and account management. It really is about identifying those flags first and then using the team to working together to be able to do that. So I'll pass to Mark to really think about kind of from the CS side as well.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and I think health scoring, however you do that in your organisation, it is a significant kind of marker as to where customers are. So I think if we go back a step before we think about renewal strategy in its sense needs to be something that stems the entire customer journey, right? So if I am going to try to simplify as much as possible the complex when it comes to renewal strategy, I like to think about, all right, do I have health scores, i.e. can I see the level of customer adoption? What are they using? What are they not using? If I don't have the ability to get those metrics because I don't have access to the tool or we don't have that level of sophisticated data yet, try to think about it in 3 ways. Number 1, do I understand the business needs? And I think Ali said it extremely well before, know the different stakeholders, because the different stakeholders have different needs, right? So make sure that you know that what's being sold and the solutions that you sold, make sure you're interfacing with all of the stakeholders that are involved there and what their needs are. Then make sure, number 2, is that you're prescribing the right solution to the right stakeholder. Only once you have done 1 and 2 can you have that number 3 conversation, which is what is the value, what is the ROI that stakeholder is seeing in that solution? Because if you're able to do all 3 of those on a consistent basis and you incorporate that with health metrics, which incorporates adoption, you can start to project renewal, and therefore you can start to think about renewal strategies at that element. So if I had a renewal strategy and if I thought, all right, I have a set of customers. If I was to do a quadrant, I have a set of customers where I understand the needs. I know they're getting, I know they're using the solution. I know they're getting value out of the solution. I would probably have a different renewal strategy that I would use versus the customers that fit in the bottom left that either aren't adopting, or I don't understand their needs, or I don't think they're getting the value out of it. To which I would look to engage early. I would look to swarm those accounts where possible. I would lean heavily on the account management team to support us in that. And it really is a one ZoomInfo play. It's not just a customer success element. So I know that's a long-winded way, but when you think about retention strategies, there is no one size all. It's about understanding where your customers are, what value they're getting, can they see that value, and then defining a renewal strategy based on what they're achieving.
If I could add there, Mark, I want to remind folks that while we're in the sale, we often create what's called a mutual action plan. And the mutual action plan should never end, right? Because as you mentioned, you have different stakeholders that have different needs. A champion is going to want you to make their job better every day. Make my job suck less each day. An economic buyer is actually going to care about business outcomes, again, the dollars and cents of the outcome. And they probably care about a political win, right? So when we talk about having a mutual action plan, it's who are we engaging at the right time and at the right altitude. A person who talks to your champion may or may not be the same person who talks to your economic buyer, and your economic buyer at different phases of the deal. So going back to sales process, your economic buyer may be a head of sales, head of marketing, but at the end of the process, your economic buyer might be the CFO, right? So again, just engaging the right person, and it continues after the sale. In post-sales, are you continuing to talk about mutual accountability? The person who brought you in, the champion, the economic buyer, they also have an incentive to make sure that it's successful. So are we holding QBRs with the customer afterwards to make sure that, again, they're utilizing the product as well as they can to make it sticky and let them be the hero of the story?
Well, thank you very much for taking those answers and delving into them. So it's been great. So thanks to the audience as well for your time, for joining this session. We hope it was useful. As a reminder, this session will be shared with you within 1 day. So, and with that, that's a wrap. And we hope to see you on another session. And we wish you a very good day wherever you are. Thank you.